David Thayil. He was a public affairs officer at the Pentagon in 2001. And on the morning of September 11th, American Airlines Flight 77 slammed into the outermost ring of that building just 100 feet from his desk. He not only had the wherewithal to somehow escape that, survive it, get out with his life, but he also saved the lives of many others. And for that, he was awarded the United States military's highest honor for a civilian.
It's just weird to think that it was 20 years ago. Probably like you, I've had, perhaps call it the luxury of hiding behind a camera, of hiding behind a control room wall to look at September 11th without fully immersing myself into the emotions of that day. And before that, I worked at the Pentagon. There was a job to do the morning after the attack, and I, along with thousands of others, lined up to get back to work at the Pentagon. So in many ways, I sort of hid behind my work at the Pentagon, and I've hidden behind control rooms and cameras for the last 20 years or so also.
And you're not telling that, you know, the audience, the big story. I met you because I found you as Larry King's executive producer and begged you to come and work on this show, and here you are, and then found out about this experience. You have a profound memory of the very few moments before the impact of the plane, which was extraordinary, and then the moments after. Can you walk me through that?
We knew what happened in New York. We had a big event that we were getting ready for in the Pentagon when I was working in media relations at the Pentagon. We had a big event that we were getting ready for like everybody else. We heard the chatter of the first plane hitting the tower. We gathered around televisions. We saw the second plane hit. And like everybody else, we knew that this was something different. I'd gone back down to my office to close out what I was working on, and a friend called from nearby Fort Belvoir, about 10 miles south of the Pentagon. And she jokingly said the Pentagon's probably next, and it simply couldn't have been timed any better. We could hear the airplane approach. There's just an atmospheric change that happens when a full throttle jumbo jet is in the neighborhood. And I could hear it crash. I could hear the explosion. I could hear the walls crumbling as it was coming for me. My friend had heard me say a cuss word that she had never heard me use before, when it was just an explosion that ripped through my office. A wall landed on top of me that protected me. The fireball passed over me and killed people who were behind me. There were about 5 people who died within 40 or 50 feet of me. But I remember each sound distinctively as it was coming toward me, even though it's probably a time immeasurable in real time.
You know, looking at these pictures, it's hard to believe, David, that you got out at all, but you did, and you rescued a number of people, which is just so remarkable. Can we show I know you're going to have to call for it because you're actually working in the control room right now, but can we show the picture and ask Mel, our director, to this one? This is a woman
you're looking at now.
Yeah.
Correct. There was a woman that was brought to us. We started afterwards when we got out of the Pentagon. Finally, there was a triage area, just a makeshift triage area that we all fell upon, and we were helping the victims as they were being pulled out. There's even an image of Don Rumsfeld, Secretary of Defense Don Rumsfeld, carrying a litter himself. That is me, who had just loaded a victim up. I turned to see this person, and it was like a war zone, with all of the various injuries around. And we literally were just triaging people. I have no medical experience, but I was telling people I knew who needed help and who could wait a little while. And I turned around, and there was a lady on a litter board that had these remnants on her that I just wasn't comprehending. I couldn't understand it. She was bald for her hair having burned off. There were these remnants on her body, but she had this most serene look on her face. And it took me a second to realize that this is a person who had been burned. Her hair had been burned off. Her clothes had been burned off. Her skin had been burned off. And the look of serenity on her face just wasn't matching what I was looking at. And I remember stopping in that moment with this war zone happening around me and saying, this is a woman who was meeting her creator. I have never seen a look of serenity like that. And it just wasn't jiving with the body that I was seeing. And we covered her with the sheet, and I just kept telling her it will be okay, it will be okay. And that is the lady that you see us loading into the helicopter, and she was not okay. Antoinette is her name, and she died of her injuries.
Antoinette Sherman. And you met her family years later, but it took you years to be able to approach them to say, that you were with her when she was being evacuated. That must have been just heart-wrenching.
I tried repeatedly. On the 1-year anniversary, I sat a couple of rows behind them. On the 2nd-year anniversary, I sat a couple of rows behind them. And I simply just wanted to go up and introduce myself and tell them about this look of serenity that I had seen on her face. And I physically couldn't do it. I physically could not get my legs to move in their direction. There was something that was just blocking me. And then when I got within 10 feet of them, I literally couldn't get the words out of my throat because it just, my throat had swollen shut. And it took me a couple of years before, on one of the anniversaries, I went to Antoinette's bench in the Pentagon Memorial Park. And I simply sat and waited for them to show up. And I recognized her because she looks just like her daughter. And I stood up and I introduced myself and I told them the story. And I asked their forgiveness for taking so long to tell them. And they immediately forgave me. And 20 members of Antoinette's family, cousins, her mother, her foster child, enveloped me in this hug. And we just all sat there crying over the memories of Antoinette.
You know, David, it's hard to believe here we are 20 years later, having this conversation live on air from the control room, to the anchor set. And I was struck by a statistic that, Jim Guthrie, one of our producers, found, and that is that 1,106 people were never identified, lost that day, but they never had that moment where they could bury their loved one like they were able to bury Antoinette. And I'm just wondering, for you on that day, you're such a positive person. I saw hell and you saw the best of America. And I'm just wondering 20 years later if you feel the same way that you felt on 9/11, which was this is the best of us in the worst of times.
It was the darkest moment of our country, perhaps. And I did. I saw the best of humanity that day. I've told you this before, that it was in that moment, that day, it didn't matter if you were a Republican or a Democrat. It didn't matter if you were a gay or born again. It didn't matter if you were of Muslim descent or Irish descent. It simply didn't matter. All I saw was the best of humanity. I saw humans running into fire to save other humans. I saw I saw bravery. I saw the best of humanity that day, and it has sustained me for these 20 years. That no matter what happens in our country, and these last couple of years has been rough to remember that lesson that I learned that day, admittedly. But I still think that we are going to be okay because I saw what we can do as humans, as Americans that day.
You know what, David, you work every 9/11. You do these shows, you're in work mode every 9/11 like I am. Have you ever actually stopped down to be in victim mode, or at least in remembrance mode, or in, America mode, the way everybody else looks at 9/11?
I attend the ceremonies. Each year I get invited to participate in the ceremony at the Pentagon. The first year anniversary was amazing because if you'll remember, they were determined to have those offices open, those offices that were ruined on September 11th. They were determined to have rebuilt that day, and they did. On the 1-year anniversary, there were people looking out of windows that were destroyed a year earlier in new offices watching the 1-year ceremony. Every September 11th, I usually go for a run in the morning. I like to have a quiet morning. September 11th, I will go for a run, as I say, for those who are no longer able to run. And just that sort of sets the day for me. And then I just let the day wash over me. Sometimes it's sad. Sometimes there's happiness to see when you're reunited with somebody from that day, when you get to catch up. But I don't think that there's any one way to do it. For me personally, I do my morning run for those who can't, and then I just let the day wash over me, however it is going to wash over me.